about himself and about the first early years of the eye bank a lot better than I can. So I'll give you Dr. Garth Russell.
I walked to the podium the first time I spoke to the Lions Club about 15 years, a lot better than I do. Those 15 years, things have happened. You'll notice that my speech is rather brown, on brown paper. And with my wife of many years, she said, what about my paper? She said, oh, it's fine away. And so here is a speech that I gave to the Lions State Convention in June of 1961. And it was as I was leaving. I had spent my year there, and I was turning it over to them and said, that was my agreement, and I said goodbye to them. What I'm going to do is just read the first paragraph so you get sort of a little sense of what it was at the time, and then I'll finish and read about half of the last page. And in the interim, I'm going to tell you a story. It's a story about a lot of people, a lot of good people. And there had to be some supreme power in all of this because things happened that I never expected to happen. Didn't think it was possible. Things I don't think you realize that still affect our lives so much today. Not only in ophthalmology that came to the Lions Club, but of all of medicine that came out of this project. Now, I had graduated from medical school at the University of Kansas, School of Medicine, in 1959, and what was interning at the University of Kansas in Wichita at that time. When in about April, I received a call from a man called Vern Wilson, Dr. Vern Wilson. He had become dean of the School of Medicine at the University of Missouri. They had started a four-year school. They had a two-year school for many years, started a four-year school. Warren tells me, the historian, that in 1951, they graduated their first MD in 1954. So he called me, and he was the associate dean at KU, and he said, Garth, I've got a job for you. I said, oh? He said, well, I want you to come to University of Missouri. Well, having a degree from K-State and KU, I said, well, as I understand, all NU does is party down there. They just have parties every night. And I'm past that, you know. I'm married with a couple of children now. He said, no. He said, we've got a project that you are specialized in, that you have knowledge of, and I want you to come and talk with me. And I said, he said, there's no use us discussing it now. We'll pay you. Come on down and spend a week with us, and we'll talk. And we'll pay your way and all that sort of thing. Of course, as an intern, that was very important. And so, what did I do? I got on Ozark. And I flew in an old DC-3 down and landed out at what the old airport. I mean, I said, God, what kind of a place is this? But I got off. And you were absolutely, Kansas were absolutely correct. They had a reception and a party every night. It was marvelous, and I think Warren was in part of it and all that. But Dr. Wilson took me into his office and he said, Garth, you know, he said, I started this job about 6 months ago. And he said, we have a special project here, and I want you to talk to one of our doctors, Dr. John Bessler, who is our new chief of ophthalmology. And said, the Lions Clubs of Missouri has started a project in which they want to see if they can't straighten out the eye tissue area, transplantations of eyes that occurs in the trauma. And I said, well, I didn't think there was that much to it. When somebody died, they took out the eye to put it in the highway patrol car who drove it as fast as they could to somebody who needed it and all that. I thought that's all it is to it. He said, you're right, but it should be more than that. And he said, I know you have some administrative abilities, so plus you have been doing research, and I had been doing research and publishing in transplantation of tissue, particularly arteries. Back in those days, we didn't have all the artificial materials, and so we were taking arteries out of people and transplanting them to somebody else, and I'd done research with that. And I said, but I don't know anything about eyes. He said, eyes are part of the body. And so he said, they're tissue and all this sort of thing. So I said, okay, I'll talk to him. But I said, I want to be a surgeon. I want to be a trauma surgeon or a pediatric surgeon. And we talked about it. And so then I met with Dr. Bessler. And he went on to say that there was a man in Washington, D.C. At that time by the name of John King, who was an ophthalmologist who had been in the service, as I understand it, for some years, but he had some idea of trying to process eye tissue in which it could be stored. Now, the difficulty with eyes, there were two kinds of transplants you needed to do. One was someone who had gone blind, and the front of the eye, had become glazed over, and you couldn't see. And that one, you could wait until some tissue was available. And the other one was trauma. It's like I saw in the picture in there, like a young man from Skidmore, Missouri, in which one of his friends threw a stick in his eye and ruptured the eye. And then, of course, to sew the eye and get it back together, and scars, and you can't see, and all of that. So you needed something tissue you could do at that time. And there was no way that you had a tissue at any one moment. For two reasons. Number one is that if you took an eye out of a person, that immediately you had about 8 hours to transplant it before it deteriorated to where it was not any good. Or if you had special containers, they had some vacuum containers and all, and that they could keep it up to 72 hours. But beyond that, it was useless. There wasn't anything for it. Plus, it was very, very difficult at that point to get people to donate their eyes or to give up a part of their body when they die. And so that it had to be some publicity and somebody would do that. And it occurred so rare, you remember that there used to be an article in the paper about it, that sort of thing. So this is where we stood now. I listened to this, talked with Dr. Bessler about it, talked with Warren, Alex Estes, the committee that they had, and we talked about what they wished to accomplish and how they wanted to put it together and what their visions were. And so because by then I was still saying, I want to be a surgeon. I want to be a surgeon. I can't, this is nice and it's wonderful, but I only have so much of my life left and I've got to be a surgeon. Well, I walked into Dr. Wilson at the end, and he sat down and he said, Garth, okay. He closed the door. Said, Garth, okay, here's the proposition I have. If you will come in and spend 1 year, and I mean 1 year working day and night, as I know you will, and go and communicate and plan and see what you can get this going, if you'll spend 1 year, I will put you through your training to be a surgeon at a price you can afford to feed your family. And that was, and in those days, when you were a resident in training, you drew $200 a month. And that, and I had gone through medical school and all that, thank God, on the GI Bill, but I didn't have that much money to go. So that was the key. I said, by then, these guys had sold me on the project. And I'd begin to think how you could put this together, what the problems were. And so I agreed to that.